Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Dietsch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is GenreVision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And we are concluding Lithgone month, our celebration of the wonderful actor John Lithgow, with 1993's Cliffhanger, starring Sly Stallone. Before we do that, just a quick call to action, and it's one of our favorite calls to action. We have a new patron over at patreon.com/GenreVision. This is Kevin. Hello, Kevin! Hope you're listening, and thank you so much for becoming a patron. Kevin now has access to I don't even know how many hours of content we've gotten up now over at the Patreon. It's kind of ridiculous.
Last year we started doing a pre-show every week, so yeah, that's made it pretty darn big. So if you want to access a library of way more GenreVision stuff, patreon.com/GenreVision is the place to do it. Our premium tier that gives you access to monthly currently consumings and weekly pre-shows and all sorts of other content costs $5 a month. Check it out again at patreon.com/GenreVision.
So Cliffhanger, it's interesting. You know, we decided to end the month on Cliffhanger, a movie that I've seen once before, but it was a while ago, and this was a first watch for Travis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is our celebration of John Lithgow, but in a way, this also checks off two other boxes that are somewhat in our wheel. One for sure that's in our wheelhouse and something that we like to praise is director Renny Harlin. I think it is fair at this point to call us Renny Harlin fans.
Yeah, that is absolutely accurate. You know, you and I really appreciate the way Renny Harlin makes movies, or used to make movies. He hasn't really made a movie like this in many years.
Sure.
But then again, movies don't really get made like this anymore. The only person who's really making movies like this is Chris Nolan. More on that later. Keep listening.
I would also argue the work that Christopher McQuarrie's done on the Mission Impossible movies.
That is true. Yeah. Mission Impossible 6 especially was very, very reminiscent of this and would be a good shelf pick.
Agreed. But Renny Harlin, when you give him, I think the budget for this was $70 million in 1992 dollars or whenever it was. Man, does he make a movie. But we will get to John Lithgow, we promise. But before we do that, we have to start off talking about the opening of Cliffhanger, which, you know, Cliffhanger, it should be stated, this was a box office hit. This was very popular, both domestically and internationally. And this opening was popular enough to get parodied. I remember it being parodied in the movie Spy Hard.
Sure.
And so this was kind of a popular blockbuster hit that at this point has, if not been forgotten, just kind of relegated to being a joke. And I think that's more than a little disappointing, if just because of this opening, because I think this opening is almost a masterclass in tension.
Yeah. I hesitate to use the word suspense, but I just did it.
Well, I mean, they are suspended.
I know that's why I was hesitating to use it, because I'd be a corny motherfucker and making a dad joke about what a suspenseful sequence it was, but it really is quite a suspenseful sequence to open this movie up. It really is a big gut punch, because you figure out at a certain point, like, oh, this is the tragic beginning to this story. So we have a really, solid introduction for the hero played by Sylvester Stallone. He is climbing on a big fucking rock,
Yes, he's climbing on a rock because he's going up to rescue some other climbers, one who's played by the always welcome, always charming, always talented Michael Rooker.
Playing a good guy in this movie. I
know, right? Kind of out of form for him, but he's up there with what seems to be his new girlfriend or wife.
Yeah.
And as soon as he's like, oh, you guys got climbed up here and got stuck, so they're bringing the chopper in and they're going to have to, I don't know what the technical term is, but they got to cross a cable from where they're at on this mountain over to the helicopter.
So they got to cross this big chasm. They're suspended over this big chasm to get across to the helicopter. And Michael Rooker gets across fine, despite his bum knee. He fucked it up getting out of a hot tub, so they call him Captain Hot Tub, which is a really funny line in the movie.
But this is where I understand people viewing this and saying, like, this is like the corniest, cheesiest, what's going to happen stuff. Here's the thing. that's not always a bad thing. And I think Cliffhanger is a really good demonstration of that, because as soon as Michael Rooker's significant other is like, talking about hosting dinner that night, and Sly's like, we still on for dinner tonight, Travis was immediately like, oh, she's dead. Like, she just signed her death warrant.
Absolutely. Like, as soon as they said, hey, we're all doing dinner tonight, right? I'm like, no, you're not. Somebody's about to bite it. And bite it she does. But like this whole sequence is drawn out so well. It's a really well executed exercise in tension, like we said, suspense, hardy fucking horror.
Excellent editing.
Incredible editing, but also really demonstrates the extent to which this movie is going to go to sell its realism. Not in that everything is realistic in the movie, but in that shots look incredibly real. Like even shots that are composited against blue screen, or, for lack of a better word, faked, to make it look like a character is dangling above this huge precipice. This feels like an IMAX movie. It really is dizzying, the kind of effect that they get by making these actors look like they're dangling over these huge the areas. They shot this in Italy in the Dolomites, and holy cow, some incredible vistas. It just commits so hard, to putting every dollar of the Hollywood money on the screen that it can. Like there are some shots where it's like, in the background, you see Sly Stallone and he's really climbing on a rock, and it's him. And then in the foreground, you've got Michael Rooker. And then in the background, you've got a real helicopter on top of a real cliff. It's like, none of this is fake. This is really there. And they're doing a lot of this for real. The kind of stuff that Michael Rooker does getting across that line. I mean, not to be crass, but it really can make you sack shrivel looking at stuff like that. But Drew is more afraid of heights than I am, but I'm certainly no friend of like high spaces. They certainly make me cringe. I would probably walk across a suspended bridge. Drew would not.
I mean, I've walked across one suspended bridge in my life and hope I never have to do it again.
He never recovered.
And I haven't. I mean, yes, heights are, I would say, way up there. If not my number one fear.
Did you just say way up there? You fucker.
Yeah. Look, it's
heights are way up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope.
I mean, look, we can't avoid it. A lot of our vernacular as human beings involve things like this. And we're talking about a movie. The movie's called Cliffhanger, for God's sake. Mm-hmm. Like it's a joke in of itself, but it knows, like, it's not poking fun at it. And that's what I wanted to get across with this opening is like, yes, this woman is doomed from the moment you see her, and the every line of dialogue she's saying, it's like, you might as well just jump off right now and just get it over with.
Yeah.
But the structure, the editing, the performances from Sly and Michael Rooker, it all sells it. It sells the opening extremely well. So when she does eventually fall, which I think it's really funny, whatever the brand clip that is, there's a credit at the end credits that's like, that brand of clip was modified to enact the accident scene in this scene.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess there is a really extreme close-up on that piece of hardware that cracks and you can see a logo on it, but they didn't want to make that company seem shitty.
Yep.
Ah, man. I don't know why they wouldn't just come up with a fake company name for that, or, sand it off. It's just a prop. Damn.
No,
why they got to do that company dirty like that?
No, but anyways, so this happens, and this has now driven a wedge, because the whole deal is that Sly decides to go across the rope to try and save her when her thing snaps, and Michael Rooker saying, no, the harness is not going to, it's not weighted for two people.
Right.
It's going to screw things up. So now when he, tries to save her and eventually she slips out of his hand and she falls, Michael Rooker now blames Sly Stallone for her death, and Sly takes it like he is extremely guilty when I think it's 8 months later, we have a time jump.
Yeah. And Sly Stallone's character, Gabe, has moved away. He's starting a better job, and his ex-wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, who was also part of this, rescue team, is still living in, the Rocky Mountain area near where they used to work, and they live on a remote horse farm. So beautiful. I love that set. Or the location, rather. I love that location. But he comes back to retrieve some of his belongings to kind of finalize their separation. And this is when the sort of big kickoff to the story happens.
I mean, you said, first of all, I do want to say that Man, Renny Harlin can shoot a vista.
No shit, man.
It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And again, is the kind of stuff that I don't feel gets enough focus in modern filmmaking, because there's an assumption that whatever we're going to shoot, people are going to buy is real, and we can fake it even later and they'll buy it as real. But this makes such good use of its location, cinematography, to the point where shots are set up for it. There's a great shot in this scene where I don't want to just keep calling him Sly or Sly Stallone. So his character's name is Gabe Walker. So Gabe is standing with his back to this house, and he's having this dialogue scene with his wife, Jessie, played by Janine Turner. And it's so beautiful. It's a shot that probably most people wouldn't even think twice about. But Sly is kind of in the bottom right of the frame. We can pretty much just see like his kind of torso upwards, but then the house is basically looming over him, like behind him. It's a gorgeous shot, but it also thematically tells us something about these characters and their relationship while they are just talking. Like the plot itself isn't really being advanced in that moment, but it's giving us the scene that we need to learn about these characters. And yes, it can come across as soap opera and hokey, but you know what? That is not, again, always a bad thing. And if it works, it works. And here it works.
It absolutely works. And I like that this movie was, thought of as kind of a really lunk-headed movie because that was Stallone's reputation at the time. But the fact of the matter is, like, there is a real emotional core to this story about someone who feels a lot of guilt and has experienced this big schism in their life. And the movie wants to make sure that is paid proper attention to in the first act. And by just having this scene, and it's a rather long scene of Stallone's character Gabe and his soon-to-be ex-wife Jessie having this conversation just about how they feel, it actually makes the continued relationship that they have throughout the rest of the movie mean more. I think in a worse movie, this scene would have ended up on the cutting room floor like that.
Yeah, I agree. But then we do switch over, and the plot of the movie kind of kicks into gear, and we learn that the Treasury is going to be transporting a bunch of $1,000 bills that are just made for like bank exchange stuff. There's all this, mumbo jumbo.
Right. Freshly minted $1,000 bills in 3 very designed briefcases, like these like almost like science fiction type briefcases with these blinking red lights on them and like specialized locking mechanisms, like classic movie property. Just like
it's great.
So designed. It's beautiful.
Again, it's the kind of stuff that we don't see anymore. And so that they're going to be transferring it, and they're specifically going to transfer it in the air because Paul Winfield shows up, and who's another one's like, yep, just throw Paul Winfield in a movie, and that's you +2.
Worked for the Terminator.
Yep, absolutely. He's the chief in the Terminator.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, he plays a good chief.
He is a good chief. And so they're saying like, oh, we transport them over the air because armored trucks can get, robbed, trains get derailed, all this kind of stuff. In the air, nobody can touch us. Well, again, that's another line of dialogue where it's like, the movie has just told you what it's going to do. And that's okay. Like, it is okay to do that sometimes, depending on the kind of movie you're making. And Cliffhanger is that kind of movie. It is a movie that knows exactly how it wants to be and executes it so perfectly, because we get in the air and we're like, well, we know this is going south. Why else would they be filming scenes on the airplane?
Yeah.
Like
they do a great job of setting up an expectation of like, this is what we're laying out in the movie to happen. And we're giving you this expectation that this is going to occur, but it doesn't tell you exactly how. And we haven't met all the players yet. The only player that we sort of meet first, who takes part in this plane heist sequence, is this U.S. turncoat, Travers, played by Rex Lynn, who has a really great movie mustache. I mean, just totally classy shit, just really way up there. He's in Cutthroat Island as well. So evidently he and Renny got along pretty well, but you'll recognize his face. He's one of cinema's that guys, where you go, oh, that guy. There's this great, very sort of Dark Knight Rises-esque sequence where you're not quite sure who's allied with whom until that people start shooting each other, and it's like, oh shit, it's quite thrilling.
Well, yeah, there is this real quick. I was going to say, people might know Rex Lynn most recently as a recurring character on Better Call Saul.
Ah, yeah.
But yes, it turns out that this plane heist is going to happen. It turns out that everybody on the plane except one agent who was like a transfer agent or something with the FBI, everybody's in on this heist, the pilots and everything. But that still means they're going to blow a bunch of people apart and have wonderful, beautiful, glorious, God, I want them again in movies, squibs. The squib work in this is all wonderful. All the gore in this that we'll talk about is wonderful.
Yeah, it's a pretty bloody movie.
Yep. And so this goes down, and then yes, there's going to be another plane, a smaller kind of private jet that is going to come up alongside this larger jet, and they're going to string a line between the two planes and zoop, send the cases of the money over to the plane. Well, of course, this goes wrong, but not before we see a stunt that, if this is correct, the info that I've got here, it's still up to date, is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the costliest air stunt ever performed, because the stuntman Simon Crane was apparently paid $1 million to actually cross between two planes for real at an altitude of 15,000 feet. It is so jaw-droppingly cool.
Yeah, it is an incredible sequence, a long sequence too. It really takes its time to play out. And there are lots of various twists and turns. I mean, it's like a mini movie inside Cliffhanger. And I have to pay credit to the writers here, but there is something a little bit strange about the writing credits on this one. This is something that we at GenreVision like to get into because nobody else does. The first credit, and it's an odd credit that we probably wouldn't see today, is based on a premise by... Well, what is a premise and who created it and for what purpose? Turns out it was a rock climber who also worked in entertainment, a guy named John Long. He had worked with Sly on some projects, and he wrote this novella, and the novella is the premise that this is based on. But like for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's just so tangentially related to the original text. Like they don't even mention the name of the novella. They just say it's based on a premise. They don't say it's based on a novella. The novella is called Rogues Babylon, which nobody would ever call a movie ever.
Terrible title.
Yeah, awful. And then it went through a couple more writers. There was a writer that's credited with Screen Story. That's Michael France. And then both Michael France and Sylvester Stallone have screenplay by credits.
Apparently Sly did so many rewrites on the script that the production company Carolco, we kind of like Carolco over here, they actually arbitrated with the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, to get Sly a writing credit on it. And for anybody who doesn't know, Sly Stallone wrote Rocky, so he is not some chump lunkhead writer that I think a lot of the persona that gets put upon him. He's a legit screenwriter.
Yeah,
and I think he brings a certain level of, yes, high emotionality to the movie, but emotionality.
Well, I mean, he likes writing movies where the characters, even the tough, muscly men have some sort of sensitive core to them. And maybe he's gotten away from that in his old years because he likes to kind of pander a little bit more, I think. There is this core of pain and guilt to his character in this movie, Gabe. And while the rest of the movie kind of plays out as a more traditional Renny Harlin action thriller, it would play very differently if the character was just some, muscly badass from the start who hadn't fucked up.
if he was Dwayne Johnson.
Sure, yeah.
Like the kind of roles that Dwayne Johnson, not to knock Dwayne Johnson by any means.
Mr. Cool Guy competency porn, that character. That's not a knock on Dwayne Johnson, who's a great performer, but it's the kind of characters that he often plays where they're just like, I'm super cool guy.
Yeah, and I'm quippy and I'm a great family man and everything's cool, and then these other guys come and screw everything up for me. Mm-hmm. Gabe is a really good kind of, he had, like, when we were watching it, Travis kept saying, because what eventually happens is this plane heist goes wrong, the plane crashes, and the 3 briefcases of money get scattered all over the Rocky Mountains, and so the troop of bad guys calls in like, we're a bunch of hikers, we're stuck up here, please help us, so they can get a guide to help them to get out, find the money. We should say that during this heist is when we're introduced to our main villain, played by John Lithgow.
Yep. It isn't actually until they radio for help that he actually removes his respirator. Like, he has a full face mask that's attached to oxygen because they have to open up the door of the plane at altitude. It's so crazy. I still can't believe they did that. But we see Lithgow, and he expects, he looks like we expect John Lithgow to look in this sort of role. And you can tell he's the villain, and he carries a certain intimidating quiet to him. There's a scene where one of his associates is radioing for help, and they ask, the person on the other end of the radio asks, like, how many people are in your party? And Lithgow just holds up, silently holds up 5 fingers. And in the body language and in the motion and the timing and the rhythm of that, you sense that, like, this is the kind of power I exercise. People listen to me with just a raise of my hand. It's a cool moment, very effectively performed by Lithgow.
Lithgow is very good in the movie and what he's given, but let us make no illusions about this. Cliffhanger is Die Hard on a mountain. And after Die Hard came out, there were a lot of Die Hard in a movies, some that are worth your time, some that aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very clear that Lithgow's character, Eric Quaylen, who, like, that's just a bad guy name. Like, that's just the name you come up with when you write a bad guy in this kind of movie is Quaylen. He is definitely going for a Hans Gruber type of aura about him. He is cold, calculating, like, no bullshit, all business.
Yep. He's the one who gives the orders, and the other people carry them out. So he ends up having a lot of hench people who do his dirty work for him throughout the course of the film. And it's not till later on in the film that he gets his hands dirty. But here's the issue with Quaylen that I have that recurs throughout the movie. Quaylen is a really thinly written character who is performed in sort of a one-note way, but that's kind of how he's written. The most we get on him as far as backstory is there is a scene with, some other,
Zach Grenier
suits. Zach Grenier is there, and there's like a Xeroxed, page that they put in front of Paul Winfield's face that has his photo on it.
It's the stock scene from this kind of movie where it's like, well, how do we tell the audience about the bad guy? Give somebody, basically have a minimum of 2 characters, have one character, give the other character a dossier, a file, something, and be like, all right, this is the bad guy, and this is some, stuff. He used to be part of this military thing, but now he's doing this. You've seen it a million times. And again, it works. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but
it's bare minimum, though. It's really nothing.
I would be okay with that if Quaylen got more moments in the movie to really kind of shine. Don't get me wrong. I think as the movie progresses, we do learn more about his particular brand of ruthlessness.
Yes. But I mean, there's not even a scene of him really, twirling his mustache. And I kind of would have liked an additional scene of him, if only for just more Lithgow, because we love the guy.
Well, I mean, look, we started this month off with Ricochet, which might be like John Lithgow's mustache is like the length of a football field in that movie. Like he's twirling it so hard, and it's fucking incredible. Like,
well, and we're kind of we're kind of summing our John Lithgow feelings up because this is our last movie in the Lithgow month. But like, he really got the chance to shine as a villain in movies like Ricochet and Santa Claus the movie, which we reviewed last month, because he's allowed to go so big. Lithgow, for as much subtlety as he can have and as, kind of emotional nuance that he can bring to roles, he's great at playing huge. I mean, if he wants to do a kind of performance that's like to the stratosphere, he can fucking pull it off, man. He's fantastic at it. It's what makes him such a great stage actor as well. And I kind of wish that he was allowed to go a little bit bigger in this film, or, was written a little bit bigger. Because he ends up being, a presence in the movie, and certainly a welcome presence, a very, very welcome presence in Cliffhanger, but is one of the more thinly written roles, I think, that we're talking about this month.
Yeah, I would say that there's only one moment where he gets to do like a true blue full heel of a character, in which when we meet him, there's this other person on the team, Crystal, played by Carolyn Goodall, who it's clear that there is some kind of romantic affiliation between her and Quaylen. Mm-hmm. They subtly say, they don't ever say if they're married or what they are, but they clearly have some kind of relationship. And then towards the end of the movie, they have a helicopter that they have to get out of, and as a bargaining chip, he grabs her and shoots her in front of Travers and is like, well, I just killed the only other helicopter pilot we have. I'm the only person that can get us out of here. So you got to go, you got to march to the beat of my drum. And that moment is like, man, that was really good. We needed like 2 more of those before that.
Yeah.
We needed a couple more moments where he was they try, they do a "Can you fly, Bobby?" to make a RoboCop reference, where some guy I think gets injured during the plane heist, and it's just like they just he dumps him out the plane. But yeah, there needed to be more of his sense of particular menace and just kind of apathy towards those in his in his heist gang. Lithgow's good. But I will also admit, we were spoiled starting with Ricochet. There's no question
shit,
about
man.
that.
Yeah, there are some good hench people in this. Like,
yes!
Crystal gets her moments. My favorite hench person in this is played by Leon, who you might recognize from the movie Bats.
Yes, that beloved piece of cinema.
Yeah, he plays the sidekick in the movie Bats.
I like Bats. There's
a good bat horror scene in this movie too, but
there is. Yes,
he plays a hench person called Kinnett, and the fight scene between Gabe and Kinnett is pretty great. It actually sells Kinnett as like particularly evil. And it's like, okay, I like that feeling that, this character really has it out for Gabe because he's a sadistic motherfucker. And I think that's kind of missing from Quaylen's performance a bit. But the way they dispatch this hench person in this movie is nothing short of fucking brilliant. I mean, it's preposterous, but it's brilliant.
Here's the thing. We can just list off the hench people deaths because they're pretty much all great.
Yeah. The one guy whose Sly rides like a fucking sled down that hill.
Oh my, incredible. Like they're falling, they're sledding down this mountain slope, and they're basically taking turns being the sled. And eventually Sly gets the guy on the bottom and is pushing his face into the snow, and they're going so fast that he comes back up and his face is all bloody and, scraped up. And then they fly, right when they get to the edge of the cliff, Sly is able to hang onto the side of the cliff. But then we get this great kind of like bird's eye shot of this hench person just falling into pitch black. It looks like he's going into the sunken place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Looks like he's falling into a black hole. It's beautiful.
So there's that. The one that Travis was talking about with Leon is Kinnett, is they're fighting inside of this cave. And granted, there's certainly racial representation issues that are, very baked in with these kind of movies that there's issue to take with here. Absolutely. But in the pure fun of it, this might be my favorite death in the movie.
I really do think it is the best, hands down.
Tell him what happens, Travis. It's so good.
So there is a point where Sly Stallone...
A point?
A point. There is a moment. Oh, you son of a bitch. You dad joking motherfucker. So in this battle, you believe Sly is about to be bested. You're like, oh no.
He gets his ass kicked.
He does. Yeah, it's nice to see him get beat up. He made a bunch of money doing that in the Rocky movies, just getting the shit kicked out of him. Mm-hmm. But he manages to muster the strength to lift Kinnett above his head fully. And then seeing the stalactite hanging from the ceiling, a very sharp stalactite, pushes Kinnett's body up onto the stalactite, so the stalactite pierces him through the back and all the way through the chest. It is hilariously bloody and just so delightfully like, oh my God, like this movie actually went there. This is just trash. I love it.
It's, and here's the thing. Sly's not the only one knocking off hench people in an awesome way. Michael Rooker, who we should say what eventually happens is that Michael Rooker, and Sly, I keep calling them that, but I really should be referring to their character names, which are Walker and Tucker, Gabe and Hal. They go up there responding to the distress call, and they're obviously having a contention because, Hal is like, I don't want you here. You need to go back down. Like, you don't need to be part of this rescue mission. I don't trust you. And so they have that contention, but then they end up in the midst of these criminals and are having to help them out. And during the first time they're trying to recover one of the cases, Quaylen says, like, I don't think we need two guides. Like, kill Sly when he, kill Gabe when he comes back down. And Gabe's able to escape. They think they've killed him, and then it becomes the Die Hard situation where it's like, yeah, there's that one man army taking out these guys. And so later, Hal, Michael Rooker's character, is getting beat up by one of the henchmen, who I guess was a soccer player, football player. And he has this big long monologue about, like, I was a striker and all this. and so he's just kicking the shit out of Michael Rooker. And Michael Rooker is hanging off the side of a cliff. And this guy leans down, he's stepping on his fingers. And Hal pulls a little, knife out of his back pocket, stabs this guy on the leg, and the guy screams, leans down, and Hal reaches up and grabs the shotgun off of him and then places the shotgun on his chest. And after this guy's been going on about, like, he's like, lines up for the penalty kick and all this, Michael Rooker says, season's over, asshole.
Great one-liner.
Fucking so good. So then shoots him while pushing him backwards over him to fall over the cliff, shoots him with the shotgun. Majestic death.
So here's the thing. The way that we're describing this, if you haven't seen the movie, can kind of make this sound really stupid. I mean, listen, it's not an especially smart film, but the fact that all of this is happening in location shoots.
For the most part.
Yeah. There are some stuff that's obviously shot on sound stages later when, like, Travers' death happens. But this kind of stuff where it's like, yeah, this was shot on, like, real cliff edges with the actors, like, really in quite a bit of danger. Like, there was some concern over the safety. And it's like, there's this sort of apocryphal story now that Renny Harlin, had so much faith in the safety gear that he put a harness on himself and jumped off a cliff.
I believe it.
Yeah. I mean, Renny Harlin was a nut at the time, this young Finnish guy who probably thought he was made of, cold rolled steel. But this movie's commitment and everyone's commitment, not just Renny Harlin and not just the stars, but everyone's commitment to make this feel as real as possible and, like, huge in scope. It really does have this cumulative effect over the movie of, like, wow, this is really something. This is a huge statement. This is an enormous fucking movie. That is the most, like, overwhelming, like, vibe that I get from the movie overall. Like, just speaking generally, it's like, wow, that was huge. And I kind of fucking loved it.
I think that's reflected even in elements of the movie you're not seeing. Trevor Jones's score for Cliffhanger is really good. Now, granted, it's big, it's bombastic, it's in your face.
Man, they play that fucking theme a lot too. Woo.
They do. But here's the thing. It all feeds into this idea of, look, we know we're making a bit like what you said would be the equivalent of an IMAX, big popcorn blockbuster action thing today. They knew that that's what they were doing, and there was no reason to try and, like, do you really want to see, like, the classy, angling for an Oscar for a performance kind of thing from Cliffhanger? I maybe there'd be a good version of that, but it might be a little less fun, and Cliffhanger is fun with a capital F.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, this is, no classic, but it, it has had a bit of a legacy. They're still kicking around the idea of rebooting it right now. Anna Lily Amirpour, of all people, is attached to direct.
Well, yeah, I want to take issue with something you said. You say it's not a classic, and I think that is more. Here's the thing, though. I kind of disagree. I think it's a classic in a very specific way, and it's one that you even pointed out, is that this is prime 90s blockbuster.
It is.
Like, I think it's a classic 90s blockbuster.
Yeah, and I do think it deserves rediscovery because it's pretty remarkable in a lot of ways. And I think at the time, it wasn't really appreciated for what it was. There were 3 technical Oscar nominations for this movie, all of which I think, as far as nominations go, were deserved. However, you know what it was competing with at the Oscars that year? For all those technical awards?
Schindler's List?
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park,
so of course it lost all the technical Oscars to Jurassic Park. Of course.
Makes sense. Yeah, and that's fine, but
yeah.
I do really want to stress, and I think it's because as we've been doing this show, and Travis and I have been exploring and discovering each other's movie tastes over the years, we have a real affinity for these kinds of movies, not just from a nostalgic sense. I'll admit that the era does play into that in some regards, but it is also just a matter of pure technical appreciation. Like, when we say they really aren't making movies in this way on this kind of scale, it has to be something like Mission Impossible or Christopher Nolan. They're the only people that can get those kinds of movies made today. And I really think, I mean, not only did, when we were watching the plane heist, was I continually like, The Dark Knight Rises should pay royalties to Cliffhanger. Like, because I think it's really that good in terms of the comparing, doing these plane heists for real, really doing this.
I just hope that when folks watch this movie, that they understand that there is a really discernible and palpable difference between watching these events play out in the way that Renny Harlin shot them and had them edited together, and the way that it would be done today in terms of production, where it's like, well, we want a close-up of the actor hanging on the cable between the two planes, so of course we have to film that like we would Sean Connery in a James Bond movie. He's going to be shot against a rear projection screen, and that's fine to get our close-up, but Renny Harlin's like, no, we're going to do this in a lot of wide shots. I want to see both the planes in the wide shots. I want to see the cable. I want to make sure that people understand the mechanics of this perfectly. We're not going to do this piecemeal. Obviously there's going to be a certain, level of putting it together in the edit piecemeal that shouldn't be palpable. It shouldn't feel faked in this movie's sort of ethos. And that's not really something you can do anymore.
No,
because it's too dangerous. It's too expensive. And I don't think you could get any less than a crazy person to do it. I mean, that's why Tom Cruise is, doing the Halo jumps and shit for real. But even then, Tom Cruise may do a Halo jump, but then they replace the sky around him, so it's like still drenched in visual effects.
And not to say that there aren't noticeable movie magic things in Cliffhanger. For example, when their plane crashes, there's an adorable shot of a model plane crashing.
Oh, that model plane skimming across the snow to that cliff edge is
so
pretty
cute.
Great. Yeah, it's awesome.
So cute. But there are also, it's very clear that Renny Harlin is using his understanding of camera language and tricks to create some really striking shots. Two that stick out for me in this is when Sly is climbing just an impossible rock face in which, okay, they shot him probably against some set rock face, but then they pull out and it's like this amazing matte painting giant mountain face, and it's all in one shot.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, this is as ridiculous as it gets, but I buy it. And then there's a moment like when Hal and Gabe are having an altercation and they're standing on a cliff edge, and Hal and Gabe go at it, and Hal grabs Gabe and turns him to hang him over a cliff edge. Yeah. And there's this incredible camera move.
Yeah. And the camera pulls up and back. It's, sort of cranes up and back to reveal that they were actually doing this, because, the background moves as it should. It's not like they're shooting this against some sort of dinky backdrop on a soundstage. I mean, they're out in the elements. And the movie just feels so startlingly real because so much of the first half of it is shot in natural light. And then about halfway through the movie, we get our nighttime stuff. And that feels a little bit faker, more stage bound, because the characters are out in the woods at night. And it's like, well, you can't have, John Lithgow out in the woods at night without lights on him. So of course, lighting for movie night makes things instantly a little bit more false looking, because we all know movie nights and real nights don't look the same. But there is some really striking stuff. There's this great shot of Quaylen and, several other hench persons standing in silhouette against the woods with their flashlights. It's almost like a very John Carpenter type shot.
I immediately thought of like when we did our Demons episode last October. It's like, yeah. it's like the demons come out of the movie screen and Demons. Like but it's striking. Like Renny Harlin is at his best, this is still when he was at his best. Like he is a good visualist. He's doing stuff that draws your attention without, maybe there's arguments for it, but I don't think he's ever doing anything that is so trying to be like grab your face and smash it into the screen. Like, look at this, look at my shot that I'm crafting.
Well, he's not a music video director. I think he did come from directing commercials, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. And to be fair, he did Nightmare on Elm Street 4. Go listen to our Nightmare on Elm Street 4 episode, which is often referred to as like kind of the MTV Freddy movie,
Yeah. And I just watched 5, and I can definitively say 5 is way more MTV. But
Yes.
I think Renny Harlin is not one of these hyperkinetic, music video style directors that get a lot of criticism for like lots of sound stages and, lots and lots of rapid cuts and lots of needle drops. Like Harlin's not about that. He likes to have things play out in natural locations and big wide vistas and spaces and like staying on the wide shots as long as he can. Like I remember us watching the pirate movie he did. What was it?
Cutthroat Island.
So there's this shot near the end of Cutthroat Island where Matthew Modine is swinging from the mast of one ship to the mast of another ship. And they do this all in one wide shot. Looks fucking incredible. There's a bunch of awesome stunts in that movie. It's totally worth watching just for the stunts alone, because otherwise it's not very good.
And again, go listen to our Cutthroat Island episode.
Just that one shot of Matthew Modine really doing the fucking Tarzan swing is like, wow. That's astonishing. And then the fucking ship blows up at the end of that movie and you're like, oh my God, this movie's great. It's not a very good movie though.
It's not good, but I mean, that kind of stuff it is. And that's the thing is like Cliffhanger, coming around to John Lithgow and everything is that, yes, eventually they have their big fight out. It's wonderfully spectacular where a helicopter is crashing and Sly and John Lithgow are having a punch out fight on top of this helicopter that's hanging off the side of a mountain and everything.
Pretty awesome.
I mean, yes, it's ridiculous, but have you been watching the same movie as I have this whole time? Like, it's not like this is out of place for, like, it's earned all of this, and I think it executes it very well. I love the shot of John Lithgow when he's stuck in the helicopter as it falls down the cliff, and we have this wonderful zoom into his face, and it's one of the few, if only, moments of really good Lithgow mugging we get.
Yeah, he doesn't mug nearly enough in this movie. Oddly, Lithgow was kind of a last-minute replacement for Quaylen. And again, I don't know how apocryphal all this is, but it looks like he replaced Christopher Walken last minute in this role.
I can see this being more speaking to Walken's strengths.
Yeah. Walken would not have used an English accent though. But I know Brian Ferry, the lead singer of Roxy Music, was considered for the role of Quaylen. Renny Harlin, I know, wanted David Bowie as Quaylen, which would have been awesome, of course.
Of course. I mean, can't go wrong. And but I do, the death is fun. Gabe is able to get up to the top of the mountain with Jesse and Hal, and then Paul Winfield has shown up tracking and it's just like, all right, just hang out and we'll get somebody to come and get you. And credits roll. I mean, this movie just ends like right at the very kind of peak climactic moment.
Right.
There is no denouement.
If it really wanted to end, it would have fucking, as soon as that helicopter explodes, roll credits, which I love when movies do that.
Oh, sure.
But, this movie gives us our moment of resolution where we feel like, Gabe has overcome this sort of block he's had, this emotional trauma that was set up in the first act of the film. And he and Jesse have achieved some sort of rekindling of their romance. That's the note the movie leaves us on. And it's the correct note to leave us on. This is a good movie. I do wish really the only nagging thing I have about it is I do wish it was a slightly meatier role for our boy Lithgow, because it's really not much more than an accent.
Now, it's an unfortunate movie to go out for this particular theme month, because, again, he's not bad in it, but there's so much more, and there's hints of it throughout the movie where it's like, man, there's a lot more he could be playing with here. And unfortunately, I just don't think it's given to him. I mean, as far as a summary of Lithgone month, I'm very glad we did this. If nothing, just for Ricochet, which is going to be a tough movie to beat as one of the best movies we do this year. We really kicked off 2021 on the highest possible note. Warner Brothers, if anybody from Warner Brothers is listening, please put Ricochet on Blu-ray and give that movie love. We will buy it immediately. Looking across the movies that we did, obviously we don't have to make the argument here that John Lithgow is a phenomenal actor. That's been made. I do think what's interesting about the movies that we've done, and I will include Santa Claus the movie that we did in December with this, is that Lithgow is one of those great character actors that I don't know if he's necessarily celebrated for being a character actor. Like, he's obviously now kind of an elder statesman of the art, and
sure,
and has kind of, I think, transitioned into those kinds of roles. Even when he does genre stuff like his role in, as Judd in Pet Sematary, maybe there's more out there, and I would love to hear it from you, loyal listeners. If there's another kind of really ham and cheese, Lithgow villain performance, I want it. We didn't do Blowout, which everybody should see. Blowout's a masterpiece.
Yes.
Lithgow is super menacing and scary in that, but he's not, I really have fallen in love with him just putting teeth marks in the scenery after Ricochet. The real lesson here is don't watch Harry and the Hendersons.
No, it's a very, very bad movie that has a great Sasquatch in it. Can't knock that Squatch. That Squatch really does the job.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 on the Squatch meter.
Yeah, watch clips from Santa Claus the movie, or maybe like included as part of your Christmas watches in 2021.
And just pay attention when John Lithgow's on screen.
Yeah, which isn't till like the last third of the movie. But hey, oddly enough, you kind of need the rest of the movie to set up what happens in that last third, that bonkers, incredible last third with Lithgow making a great argument for socialism. So here we end Lithgowing Lithgone month. If you have a favorite Lithgow performance, I'd love to hear it in the comments at GenreVision.com.
Yeah.
Another thing we do at GenreVision.com is shelf picks. The shelf is a collaborative thing that we do. GenreVision is kind of a movie club, and you take part in that by offering us recommendations or sometimes substitutions. When we give you our shelf picks, we're pulling movies off of our shelves to recommend as a pairing or, again, as a substitution. If you want to give us your shelf picks, we would love to read them at GenreVision.com in the comments section for this episode. And when you do, we will read them on the next episode.
That we will. So, Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Cliffhanger?
I'm going to pull off a movie that's not as good, and I recommend it as a pairing, not a substitution. And it's The Lost World Jurassic Park. And there's a structural similarity between these two films. We have a hero who undergoes something really traumatic and tragic in the setup for this story, who is reluctantly returning to a place that they don't want to go back to. And, with Ian Malcolm in Lost World Jurassic Park, we see sort of a different twist on what that looks like. Obviously, Goldblum plays the character as this really sort of darkly quippy guy. He's just as quippy as he was in the first movie, but he doesn't exude the same energy. It's a very different riff, and it grates a lot of people. I know it grates on your nerves for sure. I still think there's a bunch of funny lines in Lost World Jurassic Park, but it's certainly not the movie that Jurassic Park was. And as a movie that aims to deliver on scope and spectacle, it certainly does, but it is so incredibly vicious and nasty and has a really bad fourth act that I don't really think it qualifies as, a meaningful part of the greater Jurassic Park conversation. But one thing it does have is a really interesting villain that, kind of like Quaylen, is there on a mission in this area to get money. He is there to make money with these dinosaurs. It's played by Arliss Howard, who is, he's using his real British accent, incredibly posh, just rich with, just a rich accent, very, very wealthy sounding, playing John Hammond's nephew. And he creates such a sort of a delicious twerp villain character who by the end is sniveling for his life and is really given a great example of just desserts, or this this very twisted idea of just desserts that this movie has. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a better written villain, if only because there is one scene of this character. He shows up early on at John Hammond's mansion and has a brief interaction with Ian Malcolm, and it's just enough to give you, it's like, okay, I hate this motherfucker. And I can't wait to see him get eaten. So again, a very thinly written character, but he's given just enough. It's more than just a dossier on a Xerox sheet of paper. So it really does count where it helps. And that's my shelf recommendation for this week. What are you pulling off the shelf, Drew?
I mean, I feel like this is the most obvious pick you could go for, but screw it, because I want to take an opportunity to maybe give it some love. It's Die Hard 2, directed by Renny Harlin. He made Die Hard 2, and then he made Cliffhanger. Like, he made 2 Die Hard movies, essentially. Die Hard 2 is a movie that I think deserves some more reappraisal and love, because I get it. As a sequel, it's the worst kind of sequel, because
Totally.
it is just the exact same movie done again, but you put a different coat of paint on it and try and sell it to people and say it's something else. Totally understand that argument. Absolutely. Die Hard 2 is also one of the most fun, stupid movies you'll ever see.
Yeah, it's honestly pretty good. And one of the reasons I like Die Hard 2 is that they actually find a way to bring Reginald
Vel Johnson.
Yeah, Reginald Vel Johnson back in the
They
movie.
bring, that's another thing where it's like they bring everybody. They bring back the, oh my God, William Peter. No, it's not William Peterson.
The awful reporter from.
Yes, the EPA guy from Ghostbusters,
Yeah.
as everybody knows.
This man has no dick.
They bring him back. It's like, and he's doing basically the exact same thing. Like, the beat structure of Die Hard 2 is almost a total copy of the first one. So
You know what I love about that movie is it's based on a novel that is entirely unrelated to the novel that is written that Die Hard was based on, and by an entirely different author. I think that was very funny.
Well, I mean, that's the case with, I think every Die Hard sequel has been another spec script that they just turned into. So there's like this wonderful kind of, exploitative approach to making Die Hard sequels.
Yeah, you just put John McClane in anything and you make it a Die Hard. Yeah.
Exactly. But man, like, Die Hard 2 has William Sadler as your main villain. Like, how can it be bad? Like, how can it be all bad? William Sadler.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty decent flick. There's some really, really cool shit at the end. There's a really fantastic shot of a plane landing, and it creates this incredible vortex behind the engine. And Renny Harlin was like, hold on the vortex. Hold on. We got to get
Yeah, I mean,
cool shit, man.
I enjoy Die Hard 2 as its own thing. Like, you have to view it like not attached to the rest of the franchise, and certainly not as a direct sequel.
No.
But on its own, I think it's a really fun, really dumb movie.
Oh yeah.
So if I can get any Die Hard 2 love out there, I want to put it out there, because I think it gets a bad rap. I understand why it has a bad rap, and I'm not saying it's not deserved, but that's not the only metric you should be judging it by. So now we get to go over to the listener shelf picks for last week's episode on Raising Cain. Loyal listener Eric Fuchs had a shelf pick, but we're going to come back to that a little bit later. Mr. Milksteak went with Session 9 and Identity. Both movies I remember liking, but have not revisited in a long time. Would pretty much be first watches at this point.
Hot take here. Identity is my favorite Jim Mangold flick.
Okay, all right. I can dig that. JT went with Magic, the Anthony Hopkins film, which is a great movie, very dark, very effective, and a big bummer. Big bummer of a movie, but a very good movie, and one worth checking out. And last but certainly not least is GenreVision sister Danielle Ryan. Hi, Danny.
Hey, Danny.
And Danielle's chef pick was Peacock with Cillian Murphy and Elliot Page, which Danielle says that it's the most serious version of a multiple personality story I've seen. I have no idea what this is.
Neither do I. I'd never heard of it before Danny said it. So thanks, Danny, for the recommendation. I will look into it.
Yeah, no, I always like finding out. It's like, because most movies will be like, oh, I've heard at least the title. Like, I'm like, I recognize the title, if nothing else. This is a total blind spot, and I love when those come across my way. So thank you so much, Danny. I should also say that Danny mentioned about Renny Harlin, asked us Mindhunters when. Trust me, Danny, one day we will do the Mindhunters episode, and you will be on it. I promise. There's no way we would do that episode without you. So thank you so much, everybody, for the shelf picks. Love seeing them every week, and can't wait to see the ones for this week. Let's do some currently consuming.
Nom 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 nom.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
Christopher Nolan's Tenet finally became available to me in a safe way. I only recommend watching movies in safe ways. What I mean is that it became available for rental on all the popular VOD platforms. I rented this movie, and I wouldn't say it's a waste of like $5.99. It is a very pretty movie. There is a lot of really cool vistas shot on 35 millimeter and some larger formats as well. And it ain't much of a story, though. I'll tell you that. It is.
That's being kind.
Yeah, it is basically, and this really isn't a huge negative thing. I mean, if you love what Nolan does, then, this is fine. It is not much more than an excuse for Christopher Nolan to just do things he thinks are cool. And I don't see a whole lot of problem with that. It's obviously I think Christopher Nolan and I just have different definitions of cool, and that's cool, baby. That's fine. If you think what Christopher Nolan thinks is cool as well, you will like Tenet. One of the things I liked about Tenet is that Christopher Nolan wanted to do some shit for real, some big shit for real. Like crash a plane into a big building. It looks great. That's fantastic. Do some really fun, exotic location shoots, really big stuff. Yeah, that's great. Love seeing the scale, love seeing the spectacle. I do wish sometimes that the spectacle wasn't the priority. I understand when it is, but like there's this big sort of siege scene, almost sort of like a war breaks out at the end of this movie in the third act. And I couldn't tell who anybody was because they're all in the same suits with the same masks on. They're all running around. Some people are running in reverse. Other people aren't running in reverse. And it was just a whole bunch of stuff blowing up and people shooting guns and people behind. I was like, this is not, what is this? This is like a bad version of like what Sam Peckinpah pioneered, which is just like a whole bunch of rapid cuts of people getting shot, which at the time for Sam Peckinpah was revolutionary, fantastic stuff. But now I'm just like, I cannot be bothered to give a fuck. I'm like, please just put me back on the boat with Elizabeth Debicki, who's wonderful, and I'll watch her in anything. And Kenneth Branagh, like having marital troubles, like show me that.
Yeah, no, that's some of the best stuff in the movie. Branagh's few chances to really flex his Bond villain muscles, because I mean, let's be clear. Tenet is like the closest that Nolan has gotten to making a Bond movie.
Yeah.
Or whatever his version of it is.
It's a Bond movie with an interesting sci-fi hook. I will give it that.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote a review of it, so if you want to go looking for that, you can say it. But my big takeaway is this is like, Tenet is the most Christopher Nolan has ever gotten to be a watchmaker on screen. Like he has crafted an immaculate watch, but it's not really exciting to me to just watch the gears of a watch turn.
Sure. I mean, there are some basic human pleasures to be found in this movie. Like John David Washington is a movie star, and I think he has potential to be just as much of a movie star as his father is. I don't mean to unfairly compare the two, but like John David Washington, I think, has one of the best beards in Hollywood. I mean,
agreed. Just
incredible. And of course, we all know that Robert Pattinson, when he wants to turn on the charm and, really lean into that sort of charming British, uniqueness about him, that he's really compelling on screen.
Sure.
He's fun to watch in this movie. I liked that. And then there were some, I thought, cleverly constructed scenes. I think the movie sometimes leans a little too much on being clever. And cleverness is not worth a whole lot to me. There are some points in the movie where it just kind of gives up on the audience understanding the mechanics of it, and Chris Nolan just going, this will be cool, and you'll have to trust me. And I think that there are plenty of people who are willing to trust him on that. I'm not fully on board. I'm not fully one of those people, and that's okay. But I hesitate to call Tenet like a bad movie. I know plenty of people have called it a bad movie, or critically gone on the negative side, and I think that's that's understandable. And I've read plenty of cogent negative criticisms of the film, and some of which with I agree. It's like for me this is like it's like a 2.75 star movie. It's like just sub 3 stars, but just sort of like positive, where it's like, yeah, I enjoyed my time with it, but now I can forget about it. Thank you.
There you go. Well, real quick on my end, I watched a movie, which you also watched. This is Psycho Gorman, written and directed by Steven Kostanski, who did The Void, which I believe we did an episode on.
We did. Yeah, we did do The Void way back in the day. Very, very low budget indie Canadian monster flick.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I am so on board with what Kostansky is doing in terms of really being cool with, look, I'm making big, rubbery, doofus shit as far as effects and monsters and characters, and I don't give a shit if you think it looks fake. It looks awesome to me. This is another instance of like, look, this director is just doing what they think is cool. And in this instance, I'm 100% on board with their idea of what is cool and fun. Psycho Goreman, you described it as cute and not in the dismissive way sometimes we use cute. And I would agree with that. I think it's a serviceably cute movie.
Yeah, it's kind of adorable, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think the two young performers at the center of it, I think they're a bit much, and I think the script, I think the biggest problem with the movie is the script is a little too in love with the smell of its own farts.
Sometimes, but I also think it goes all in on a lot of its sillier ideas, and
which is great.
I liked that. Yeah. The whole premise for the movie is two Canadian children are playing in their backyard when they discover an ancient relic. It turns out this ancient relic is to house a ruthless alien revolutionary who once slaughtered many.
It's the opening of Power Rangers.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
It's opening up Rita Report like, after 10,000 years, I'm free. It's time to conquer Earth. Like, this is drawing upon Tokusatsu or the most popular brand of that being like Super Sentai.
Exactly.
It's drawing upon that. It's drawing upon a lot of that kind of like sci-fi, specific sci-fi take on things where it's like, look, yeah, these things look big and fake and silly, but that's part of the fun. We all know that's how it looks.
Well, I mean, to the point that one of the enemy monsters they introduce, like halfway through the movie, speaks Japanese exclusively. You're like,
right.
Yeah, these are all like Power Ranger monsters, and it's honestly kind of fun, and it's poking fun at that concept while also milking the sort of best elements of it at the same time.
Well, I think it's like when John Waters, which, we've done a couple John Waters movies on here, and John Waters always said, like, I never parodied anything I hated. I always parodied stuff that I loved.
Yeah.
And that's what you get from Psycho Goreman. It's like, oh, they have a clear love and understanding of the stuff that they're making fun of. And in that way, yes, it works as parody, but at the same time, it is a total celebration of it as well. I think a lot more people will enjoy Psycho Goreman more than I did or you did. Simply because I think the story's pretty, by the book, it works.
Serviceable.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of dialogue and particular comedic elements that either could have been fleshed out or maybe even totally negated to better focus on the core characters and heart of the story. I think so much of the movie is a joke that it undermines it sometimes, in terms of it really nailing big emotional beats. But it's fun. Like, I had a fun time with it. I laughed. I think it has some real cult potential. And if it gets that, I support that. I think it's a movie deserving of that kind of appreciation. So it's also insanely gory, and ridiculous.
It is the best R-rated kids movie to come out so far in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, it has the spirit of a tried and true kids movie, just with really ridiculous, over the top, for the most part, practical gore.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if that sounds like fun, give it a watch. I would recommend Psycho Goreman. But now let's close things out with our
Comment of the Week.
And we're coming back to loyal listener Eric Fuchs, who had the shelf pick Mr. Brooks, the serial killer thriller movie starring Kevin Costner and his alternate personality, William Hurt. Great shelf pick, Eric Fuchs. I've not seen Mr. Brooks, but because of Eric Fuchs' recommendation of Mr. Brooks, we had a little conversation happen in the GenreVision comments at GenreVision.com between loyal listeners JT and Mr. Milksteak about wanting to watch this movie, Mr. Brooks. And it seems, and I hope we get to hear from Mr. Milksteak if they do end up watching Mr. Brooks, what they thought. And this is totally the kind of spirit we are trying to foster here at GenreVision, especially in the new year. We love the idea that we're all part of one big movie club. And if it's the movies that we're doing every week, or what has evolved out of doing the shelf picks, other movies that we're recommending and you, the loyal listeners, are recommending in the comments for shelf picks, that this is a way for us to discover things, to finally take the plunge on certain movies that maybe we were unsure about. This is the kind of movie club atmosphere that we think makes GenreVision such a special thing in our corner of the internet.
I couldn't agree more. And we want to thank everybody that's going to comment. And we are going to wrap up, but I wanted to say one thing. There will be some slight changes in format to next week's show. Nothing big. It will be a GenreVision episode with everything that you expect from a GenreVision episode. It's just going to have a different opening. That's all. Nothing big.
Nope. And we're going to kick off next month's theme week, which we're calling Hammer My Heart, in which we are going to take the plunge on some Hammer horror films, a section of the horror library that we've been kind of wanting to delve into deeper. And we're going to start off with Curse of Frankenstein, which is often seen as the kickoff to the Hammer revolution in horror. So we hope you guys will be on board with that. We know, these are a little bit older movies, but we've been kind of slacking on what we call vegetable episodes, where we do movies that are basically before 1980. And are oftentimes cornerstones of a particular genre or movement in cinema. And we thought this would be a really fun way to celebrate the entire month and have another theme month. So you can go to GenreVision.com and click on schedule and see what movies are coming up. But we'll be back next week with The Curse of Frankenstein. As always, we want to thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Dietsch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we will see you next week
right here on GenreVision.